Have you ever said no to something, only to be made to feel like the most selfish person alive for simply protecting yourself? You set a simple limit, something completely reasonable, and suddenly you are accused of being cold, distant, or somehow uncaring toward others. This is not a coincidence, and it is definitely not your imagination. This is a specific psychological pattern used to control your behavior. Today we are exploring the dark psychology of people who make you feel guilty the moment you dare to set a boundary. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this happens and how to protect your peace without losing your confidence. You will also learn the exact tactics these people use, so you can recognize them the very next time they try this pattern. Stay until the end, because the final tactic we cover is the one that quietly does the most long-term psychological damage of all. Let us start with the basic truth. Boundaries protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being, and healthy people generally respect them without complaint. For certain individuals, however, your boundary is not seen as protection, it is seen as a direct threat to their access and control. Guilt becomes their tool of choice, used to punish you subtly enough that you begin questioning whether your boundary was even reasonable. The first psychological reason behind this behavior is a deep need for control, disguised cleverly as concern, disappointment, or emotional hurt feelings. By making you feel guilty, they regain the access and compliance they lost the moment you dared to say no to something. This is not about your relationship suffering, it is about their comfort being disrupted the instant you prioritize your own needs first. The second reason is enmeshment, where healthy separation between two people feels threatening, and any boundary is experienced as painful abandonment or rejection. In enmeshed relationships, your individual needs are seen as a betrayal of closeness, rather than a normal and healthy part of any relationship. The third reason connects to narcissistic personality traits, where your boundary is interpreted as a personal insult, rather than a reasonable, simple request. Narcissistic individuals often expect unlimited access to your time and energy, and any limitation feels like a direct challenge to their authority. The fourth reason is childhood conditioning, where the person grew up believing that love was conditional on constantly meeting other people's needs. If someone never saw healthy boundaries modeled growing up, they may genuinely struggle to understand why anyone would ever say no to them. The fifth reason is entitlement, where the person genuinely believes they deserve unlimited access to you, regardless of your own personal needs or limits. For these individuals, your boundary is not information about your needs, it is an obstacle standing between them and what they feel entitled to. Now let us talk about the clear signs and tactics these people use, tactics that are surprisingly consistent no matter who is using them. The first tactic is the disappointed sigh, where instead of respecting your boundary, they respond with visible sadness, designed to make you reconsider immediately. This silent disappointment often works better than words, because it leaves you imagining all the ways you have somehow let them down badly. The second tactic is bringing up everything they have done for you, using past favors as leverage to guilt you into compliance now. Phrases like "after everything I have done for you" shift the conversation from your current boundary to an unrelated sense of owed obligation. The third tactic is calling you selfish directly, reframing your reasonable limit as a character flaw rather than a healthy form of self-care. This label is designed to make you doubt your own judgment, associating boundary setting with something inherently negative or morally wrong entirely. The fourth tactic is comparing you to others, suggesting that a good friend, partner, or family member would never say no in this situation. This comparison creates pressure to conform, making you feel like your boundary reveals a personal failure rather than a healthy, reasonable choice. The fifth tactic is exaggerating the consequences, claiming your boundary will ruin everything or destroy the relationship entirely, when in reality it will not. This exaggeration is designed to trigger fear, pushing you to abandon your boundary before you even have time to think it through. The sixth tactic is playing the victim, where they suddenly become emotionally fragile the moment you attempt to protect your own time or energy. This forces you into a caretaking role, completely reversing the dynamic so that you end up comforting them instead of holding your boundary. The seventh tactic is silent treatment, where instead of respecting your limit, they withdraw affection or communication entirely as a form of punishment. This silence is not passive, it is a calculated tool used to make you feel guilty enough to eventually abandon your boundary altogether. The eighth tactic is public shaming, where they bring up your boundary in front of others, hoping social pressure will make you cave. Being embarrassed in front of family or friends often feels worse than the original discomfort of setting the boundary in the first place. The ninth tactic is minimizing your feelings, telling you that you are overreacting or being too sensitive about something completely reasonable and valid. This tactic makes you doubt your own judgment, training you to suppress future boundaries rather than risk being dismissed once again by them. The 10th tactic is repeated testing, where they continue pushing against the same boundary repeatedly, hoping you will eventually give in from exhaustion. This persistence is not accidental. It is a calculated strategy based on the belief that consistency will eventually wear down your resolve. Now let us talk about how this pattern actually affects you over time, because the psychological damage builds slowly and often goes unnoticed. You may start avoiding boundaries entirely, choosing constant availability over your own well-being simply to prevent another guilt-filled confrontation from happening. This creates a relationship where your needs consistently come last, while the other person's comfort is prioritized above your own mental health. Over time, this imbalance can lead to burnout, resentment, and a slow erosion of your own sense of identity within the relationship. Your nervous system begins associating boundaries with danger, so you start saying yes automatically, even when every part of you wants to refuse. This is often called fawning, a trauma response where people please others to avoid conflict, rejection, or the discomfort of confrontation entirely. Friends and family may notice you have become more anxious, more accommodating, or constantly apologizing for needs that are completely reasonable and valid. This is called boundary erosion, a slow psychological process where your sense of self gradually shrinks around someone else's constant emotional demands. The relationship becomes deeply one-sided, where you carry the emotional labor of constant accommodation while receiving little consideration in return from them. Let us look at real-world examples of how this pattern quietly plays out across different relationships in everyday ordinary situations and dynamics. Imagine telling a parent you cannot visit this weekend, only to be told you are abandoning the family and breaking their heart completely. Imagine telling a friend you need space, only to have them accuse you of being a bad friend who does not truly care. Imagine telling a partner you need alone time, only to have them sulk for days, making you feel guilty for wanting independence. In every one of these examples, the original reasonable boundary disappears completely, replaced by guilt, accusations, or emotional withdrawal designed to punish you. This is exactly how the pattern sustains itself, because the person causing discomfort never actually faces the consequence of genuine self-reflection or change. So how do you protect your boundaries from someone who consistently makes you feel guilty for simply protecting your own time and energy? The first step is recognizing that guilt does not always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it simply means you disappointed someone's expectation. Learning to sit with this discomfort without immediately abandoning your boundary is one of the most powerful skills you can ever develop. The second step is repeating your boundary calmly without over-explaining, since excessive justification often invites further arguing or attempts at manipulation. A simple statement like "I am not available this weekend" does not require a lengthy explanation to be considered valid or reasonable. The third step is expecting discomfort as a normal part of the process, understanding that some people will resist boundaries at first. This does not mean your boundary is wrong. It simply means the other person is adjusting to a new dynamic within the relationship. The fourth step is separating someone's reaction from your own responsibility, recognizing that their disappointment is not automatically evidence that you did something wrong. You are not responsible for managing another grown adult's emotional reaction to a boundary that is reasonable, healthy, and clearly communicated respectfully. The fifth step is seeking support from people who respect your boundaries naturally, reminding yourself of what healthy relationships actually feel like. Surrounding yourself with people who do not require guilt to respect your limits helps recalibrate your sense of what normal relationships look like. The sixth step is journaling your feelings after a difficult boundary conversation, helping you process guilt without immediately reversing your original decision. Writing down why the boundary matters to you can help you stay grounded, especially when someone tries to convince you otherwise repeatedly. The seventh step is recognizing that some people will never fully accept your boundaries, and that is information about them, not about you. This does not mean giving up on the relationship entirely. It simply means adjusting your expectations about how much closeness feels genuinely safe. Protecting your peace sometimes means accepting that certain relationships will always involve some tension around your need for personal space and autonomy. It is important to remember that your needs are valid, even if someone repeatedly tries to convince you that they are unreasonable or excessive. Real love and respect can tolerate boundaries, because genuine care does not require unlimited access to someone else's time and energy always. Learning to spot the difference between healthy closeness and guilt-driven compliance can protect you from years of one-sided emotional exhaustion. Healthy people can feel disappointed by a boundary while still respecting it because their love does not depend on unlimited access to you. The goal of understanding this pattern is not to become defensive about every boundary, but to recognize manipulation when it genuinely occurs. Some relationships can improve if the other person becomes willing to reflect honestly, but many simply repeat the same pattern indefinitely without change. Understanding dark psychology is not about becoming cold toward everyone. It is about protecting your own well-being from being repeatedly guilted into submission. There are also 3 distinct types of people who guilt-trip boundaries, and recognizing which type you face changes your entire approach completely. The first type is called the wounded child, someone who genuinely experiences boundaries as painful abandonment due to their own unresolved emotional wounds. The wounded child type is not always intentionally manipulative, but the outcome often feels identical, leaving you feeling responsible for their emotional pain. The second type is called the controller, someone who uses guilt purely as a strategic tool to maintain power within the relationship dynamic. The controller rarely cares about the emotional impact, focusing instead on regaining access and compliance as quickly and efficiently as possible always. The third type is called the entitled one, someone who genuinely believes they deserve unlimited access, making your boundary feel like a personal insult. Understanding which type you are dealing with helps you respond more effectively, rather than expecting the same approach to work universally with everyone. Neuroscience also plays a role here, because setting a boundary can trigger rejection sensitivity in someone whose brain equates limits with abandonment. For someone with this heightened sensitivity, a simple no can feel like a genuine threat rather than a normal, healthy part of relating. This is why some people react so intensely. Their nervous system perceives boundaries as danger before their mind consciously processes the actual situation. Once you understand this biological reaction, their behavior becomes more explainable, even though it still does not make it acceptable to tolerate. It is also worth mentioning that boundary guilt tripping is not limited to romantic relationships, and often appears within families and friendships too. A parent who guilts a child for growing independent teaches that child love is conditional on constant closeness rather than healthy individual growth. A friend who guilts you for prioritizing other relationships creates an unhealthy dynamic built on obligation rather than genuine mutual choice and respect. A sibling who guilts you for not answering every call trains you to prioritize their comfort over your own basic personal needs. Recognizing this pattern across different relationships helps you protect your energy more broadly, not just within romantic partnerships or dating situations specifically. Another overlooked sign is selective guilt, where someone only expresses hurt feelings when a boundary personally inconveniences them in some specific way. This creates an illusion of general emotional sensitivity, making you feel like their reaction is universal, when it is actually highly selective. If someone only feels hurt by boundaries that limit their access to you, pay attention to what pattern this behavior actually reveals. It is also worth recognizing your own patterns, since people who fear conflict may be more likely to abandon boundaries under pressure quickly. If confrontation feels unbearable, giving in can feel easier than tolerating guilt, even when you know your original boundary was completely reasonable. Building confidence in your own right to set limits can make you naturally more resistant to guilt tactics over time and practice. This does not mean becoming rigid or completely inflexible. It means trusting that your needs matter as much as anyone else's needs. Another practical tip is preparing for guilt in advance, expecting an emotional reaction so it does not catch you completely off guard. Anticipating resistance can help you stay calm and consistent, rather than being surprised into abandoning a boundary you know is genuinely healthy. It is also helpful to recognize when a relationship consistently requires you to abandon your own needs just to maintain temporary peace. Choosing short-term discomfort over long-term resentment is often the healthier path, even though it feels difficult in the immediate moment. Recovery from constant guilt tripping often involves rebuilding trust in your own judgment, since manipulation can leave you doubting reasonable personal decisions. Remind yourself that recognizing this pattern is not selfishness, it is actually proof that your self-awareness and self-respect are growing. Every difficult boundary conversation can become a valuable lesson, helping you set future limits with more confidence and far less internal guilt. This growth is not about becoming distant from everyone, it is about becoming more discerning while remaining open to genuine healthy connection. Surrounding yourself with people who respect boundaries naturally can also help recalibrate your sense of what a healthy relationship actually feels like. Healthy relationships often include disappointment without any lasting punishment, rather than guilt used strategically to force you back into unwanted total compliance. Give yourself permission to feel guilty occasionally without letting that feeling control your decisions, since guilt is not always an accurate signal. Real love includes both boundaries and closeness, rather than closeness achieved only through the constant sacrifice of your own personal needs entirely. If you found this video helpful, consider sharing it with someone who may currently be experiencing this exact guilt-driven relationship pattern. Awareness is one of the most powerful tools against manipulation, and sharing this information can genuinely help protect people within your own life. Understanding dark psychology patterns like this one empowers you to build healthier relationships, rather than simply reacting emotionally without any real understanding. The more you understand these tactics, the less power they hold over your future decisions and your ability to trust your own judgment. Healing takes time, but every step towards self-awareness brings you closer to relationships built on genuine respect rather than manufactured guilt. You are not selfish for having needs, you are simply human, and humans require boundaries to maintain healthy relationships and personal well-being. Give yourself the same compassion you would offer a close friend going through this exact same guilt-filled and exhausting experience right now. If this video helped you recognize someone in your life a little better, please subscribe for more deep psychology breakdowns just like this. In our next video, we explore the disturbing psychology of people who twist every single conversation until somehow you become the problem. The right people in your life will not need guilt to maintain closeness, because their love does not depend on unlimited access to you. Trust builds through mutual respect and honest communication, not through cleverly manufactured guilt designed to bypass your natural and healthy personal boundaries. You deserve relationships that respect your limits, not ones that constantly leave you questioning whether your basic needs are somehow too much. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and remember that setting boundaries is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. There is also an important overlooked sign worth mentioning, where guilt appears only in private, disappearing completely whenever other people are present. This selective behavior reveals awareness of their own tactics, since genuine hurt feelings rarely disappear the moment a third person enters the room. Pay attention to how someone reacts to your boundaries in private versus in front of others, since this contrast often reveals manipulation. If guilt only appears once witnesses are absent, that inconsistency itself is valuable information worth taking seriously as you keep moving forward. Another important sign is sudden acceptance after resistance, often appearing only when they realize continued guilt tripping might cause you to leave. This reactive acceptance is rarely about genuine respect, and more about preventing the eventual painful consequence of losing complete access to you. Real respect does not wait for a threat of loss, it happens naturally, close to the moment a boundary is first stated. If you notice acceptance only arriving under pressure, question whether the change reflects true respect or simply a fear of losing control. Pay attention to patterns over time rather than isolated incidents, because one difficult conversation looks very different from a lifetime of guilt. Trusting your own instinct that a boundary is reasonable takes practice, especially if you have spent years doubting your own basic needs. Give yourself credit for noticing these patterns now, even if it took time, because awareness itself is a significant form of progress. Some people will spend their entire lives resisting boundaries, and the healthiest choice you can make is refusing to abandon your own needs. Protecting your peace does not require changing someone else, it only requires changing how much access their guilt has to your decisions. You can care about someone deeply, while still recognizing that their reaction to boundaries is genuinely unhealthy and consistently draining to you. These two truths can exist together, and accepting that reality is often the first step toward making healthier decisions moving forward confidently. Remember that guilt is not always truth. Feeling guilty does not automatically mean your boundary was wrong or unreasonable in any way. You are allowed to disappoint people while still doing what is right for your own mental health, energy, and long-term well-being. Choosing your own peace over someone else's temporary comfort is not cruelty, it is often the wisest and most self-respecting decision. Give yourself full permission to hold your boundaries firmly, even when someone tries every possible tactic to make you feel guilty instead. Healing from years of guilt-driven compliance takes time, patience, and consistent practice, but every small step brings you closer to genuine freedom. Remember that you can love someone deeply and still say no to them, because love and healthy limits can coexist peacefully together. Thank you again so much for watching, and remember that your peace matters more than avoiding someone else's temporary disappointment or discomfort.